Good morning, everybody, or actually good afternoon, wherever you may be. Andrew Morgan here with Shiva and the CyberCNS team. We will get started in about 2 minutes. We always start at about 3 past the hour. Let people come on in as that's typically the time we start to get everybody. Sorry for the dinging and donging here. I'm just going to mute that. All right. Let's see here. Shiva, good morning. Or actually, good afternoon.
Good morning, Andrew.
How you doing today?
Good, Andrew.
Good. All right, just give it another minute or so here, folks, as people keep coming in. Justin, good to see you. What did you think of the call yesterday?
Oh, I thought it was really good. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really good. I was really informative, and I think that John, with his suggestions, will definitely make it a lot better and a lot smoother.
Yeah, absolutely. What we're talking about, everyone, is if you're not aware of John Strand and Black Hills, he has a whole. He was a SANS instructor for 15 years. He's launched a whole training academy, and we've he's gotten involved with MSPs over the past almost year now, right, Justin? 9 months, and he's built out an entire MSP curriculum that we've got about 100 MSPs and a beta on right now, and we're kind of tweaking it. A lot of it's mapped to the CIS controls. Got a really good section in there, Shiva, on vulnerability management. And you can definitely talk to them about getting CyberCNS in some labs for anybody to use, like to simulate what he's teaching. You there, Shiv? Can you hear me? You there, Shiva?
Yes, Andrew.
Okay.
It was not unmuting for me, unfortunately.
No worries. No worries. Yeah, he is, Chris. He is very, very sharp. And it's really cool to see that he's involved. Okay, Shiv. Before after, welcome everybody to the CyberCNS partner call. I'm Andrew Morgan. I've been working with Shiva and team for, Shiva, I think this project is over 4 years old. Easy, maybe more. If you're new to the partner call, this is something that we started and about over 2 years ago when we had Alpha Code. Many of you have been on with us from the beginning and appreciate that. And so just quick agenda. I'm going to hand the controls over to Shiva momentarily. I'll keep an eye on chat. Shiva gives an update on the latest about the product, where things are headed. Feel free to comment, ask questions. I'll interrupt as, fittingly, right? And we'll probably have to go back on certain subjects where things get really a lot of chatter and chat, which is awesome. And then we'll open it up for general Q&A, typically midway through. So Shiva, with that, I'll let you take on over here. I'll be on mute and off camera looking at the questions in chat and let you take it over from here, Shiva.
Okay. So just going to quickly share my screen.
You can see it.
Yeah. So
and I just want to say another new PowerPoint format, Shiva. You're breaking out here.
So just that normal is boring, right? So we will basically we'll switch it out a little bit so that it becomes more interesting for everyone. So good morning, everyone. So I've kind of been posting the status on different groups in terms of where we are with respect to migration, but just wanted to kind of walk everyone through what is the deployed architecture, so that you basically are aware of what is entailed in the migration. I'm going to show you the migration process that we will be going through, and basically what you will get at the end of the migration. The things that we are essentially doing is that we are basically doing what we call as a lift and shift. So we're getting you to parity at this point of time with all the features that we have right now. And once we have you on that feature set, that's when we can basically roll out all the other feature sets that we've been developing over the past few weeks. So basically this two-phase piece which we had to do. The good news is basically we are now at 94% of the agents which are registered, which I'll basically talk to you folks about. But here is basically how we've deployed the whole thing, right? So that everybody is basically clear of this thing. So we have a centralized portal which is called portal.mycybercns.com, which is essentially basically hosted in Amazon CloudFront, which is a CDN. And we basically are in that CDN, we essentially look up into a database whenever you basically enter what is your domain. So for example, if your domain is switch tech v2, you just enter switch tech, or if you're basically a Dennis, you will enter WhatsApp. So once you basically enter the domain name, we have essentially created a database of each partner, and they're mapping to a primary region and a secondary region. So if you're based in the US, then you essentially are mapped to US East 2 and US West 2. So depending on where your location is, basically your primary region is set to US East 2 and your secondary region is set to US West 2. So this way, even if basically there is an outage in Amazon, basically we will be able to kind of give you the services from the other region. That's how basically we've set it up. So we have 2 regions in the US and 2 regions in Europe. We basically have only 1 region in Australia because we don't have another data center there, but we've essentially kind of done this across 2 data centers over there. So we're hoping that with that Australia will be covered. So this essentially is how we are basically routing your requests to the whole thing. So the only request is please whitelist these 2 URLs that I'm just pointing out over here, because based on your regions, you need to whitelist those URLs. Otherwise, agents will be starting to communicate with this particular URL. B, basically, all of the API calls, etc., will come to this URL instead of the old URL that probably are whitelisted. So just wanted to kind of keep it out there. Second, what are the key changes? We basically, the first thing is that for people who are using the API, this is basically kind of a breaking change. And so we wanted to kind of talk about it. So we need the API to be sent with an additional header, which is called customer ID. And this customer ID is nothing but what you enter in the domain name over there, because without that customer ID, we will not be able to route your requests. Everything else remains the same, but you need to pass this additional header. Second is that instead of basically going to your domain.mycybercns.com, which was what it was earlier, you need to send all the requests to portal.mycybercns.com. So once you send it to that, it routes your request to the appropriate engine that basically will service your API. So just wanted to kind of put this out there because we wanted to kind of make sure that these changes are made. So, and the other thing which we have done is that, as you know, we basically split everything into multiple microservices. So we now have one page which essentially lists the different types of APIs we have, and each one of them has the separate documentation. So basically it is documented. So you can see the breakdown of services and the APIs for those services basically separately. So we are just putting that into one document so that you can route from that particular document. So just for people who are using the API, I know a lot of you are using the API. So I just wanted to make sure that you look at these changes and you understand that these changes will be made.
Shiv?
Yeah.
Please, sorry to interrupt you. Lost about 10 to 14 seconds there, give or take. If you could just back up just for a touch. If you could go, just redo that last statement.
Absolutely. So here, what I was saying is that when you come to all the APIs should be routed to portal.mycybercns.com with this header. And the second thing is that since we have separated out the entire code into separate microservices, right? So each one basically scaling on its own. So the documentation also basically will be split based on the microservices. So we are creating an API catalog which has links to all these different services, and you can essentially call all these services. The signatures of the services, etc., continue to remain the same. It is just that it has been separated out separately so that they can be independently scaled. So that's one of the reasons for why basically these are coming out as separate pieces of documentation. If the team so desires, if they want one consolidated piece, we can work on trying to get that one consolidated piece once we do this migration. I'll leave it up to the feedback of the folks once they basically experience that. Okay, because I actually write the newer version because it's like each of those items are smaller and it loads quickly and it's easier to kind of manage the whole thing. But if somebody thinks it's difficult to, yeah.
Yeah, can I just give you two quick questions that I think you could knock out here?
Yeah.
All right, so Dennis, I think there was talk about allowing us to get a cert and have a custom URL and landing page. Is that correct?
Yes. Once we finish the migration, we will be able to give you a custom URL, and basically that will route you to your specific domain.
Okay, and S. Murphy, I don't know if it's Sean, Steve, or something else, so apologize. But is region failover automatic or triggered manually on your end?
It's automatic.
Cool. All right, we're up to date.
Yep. So from an architecture perspective, we have an application load balancer, which basically is looking at health of the endpoints. And in case basically the endpoints are not available, it automatically routes the traffic to the other endpoint. So that's how the weightage has been provided.
Thanks for that, Shiva.
So just wanted to let everyone know I've been sharing this over this week. So basically we have more than 130,000 agents. So this includes essentially probes and lightweight agents alone that basically are checking in. So one of the reasons for why we need this to check in over here, just because everybody might be wondering what the hell is going on with this whole piece, right? It's that what we've kind of done is we've created what is called a configuration service. Now this configuration service, when the agent comes up, instead of basically hard coding the configuration in the that we basically used to earlier do in the agent, what it does is it comes back to the central portal and says, here is my domain, here is the agent that I'm supposed to be, and here is my authentication. First tell me whether I'm a valid agent. It looks at it and says, yes, you're a valid agent. And then so how do I send data to, whom am I supposed to send data to, and what is the means of sending that data? So because what happens is when you're on-prem, we don't have the ability to put some of the infrastructure that we're putting in the cloud, which are serverless services, right? So for example, for sending data about assets, etc., we don't use HTTP, rather we use basically Amazon Kinesis to basically push the data into it so that it can be streamed into the Elasticsearch clusters that we have, which makes it faster and more efficient. Whereas when we are on-prem, we do not, basically if I have to ask each of you to deploy Kafka or something of that order and then deploy a cluster, etc., it's not going to work very well for that particular case. So the configuration service basically kind of abstracts that. So it looks at what an agent is supposed to be. Is it supposed to be connecting to the cloud or is it on-prem? And based on that, it gives it instructions saying that, okay, here is basically how you will connect to your endpoint. And this is basically what you need to connect to this endpoint. Use this and make the connection. So this part of it basically is what we did over here. So what this allowed us to do, in fact, the test that we essentially performed last week is quite a few of you, we migrated you over to the new portal. And then we basically kind of removed your registrations and then you got migrated back to the old portal. So what this allows us to do is that in case, for example, for some reason, your migration did not happen properly, we can basically revert you back immediately without basically you losing any data or any of those pieces, and we can try the migration later. So that's one of the reasons for why basically this configuration service was important. And as I am showing you, 130,000, approximately 130,000 agents are already registered. This was taken around 3 years back, and we have more since then. But this essentially is, I wanted to thank most of you because I know that it basically seems like a thing which is taking too long. But if we don't put these fail safes in and then we run into a problem, then it becomes a huge issue. Second, if you basically tomorrow choose to migrate from on-prem to cloud or cloud to on-prem, because of the presence of this configuration service, we don't have to ask you to basically kind of reconfigure our agents, do none of those pieces. That will automatically be taken care of by this particular system. So that was the entire piece of why we basically were waiting for all the agents to come and register. Because if they register with the configuration service, then we know that they basically have the configuration and have the ability to switch back and switch back and forth between the two systems. Okay. So basically now I'm just going to show you a short video, which essentially will explain the entire process of the migration, so that basically how it will come to you. So I'm just basically going to switch to the video. Just give me a second. So what will happen as soon as basically, well, so we are essentially going through the process of choosing 50 partners per region. So as I said, we have 5 regions, right? So we are basically choosing 50 partners for each region that basically will do a migration in every 8-hour cycle, right? So that's how basically we have kind of we are pushing it. So what you will see is that as soon as basically your instance is ready for migration, that is, it's been basically selected for migration, you will see the stop bar in your UI, which says that, are you ready to migrate to the new this thing? So if you click on start, it shows you the complete set of steps that it's going to do. So you click on migrate. Based on your position in the queue, it will take between 6 to 24 hours. In some cases, we've seen it takes much lesser. Probably in some cases, it was 25 minutes to 30 minutes. But it all depends on the bandwidth, like basically how much of data you have. Second is that once it is complete, we send out an email, and post the migration, you will just log into portal.mycybercns.com. Your current instance will continue to remain active for 7 days. If you need it for longer, please let us know. We'll basically this thing. One of the things is that we basically will be putting this out. We'll be waiting till June 4th. If anybody basically is not able to migrate or forgets to migrate, then between June 4th and 6th, all the remaining people will be automatically migrated. So once you basically click on I agree and I'm willing to migrate, then basically you click on migrate. What happens is it initiates, and then you can essentially look at a job that will get created. So this will essentially say that migration started. So the whole concept is that during the course of the migration itself, there is no basically disruption to your current. You can basically pull reports, you can do all of those pieces, nothing will be disrupted. So while this process is taking place, so once the migration is complete, it will say the migration is complete. So once that is done, if you go to portal.mycybercns.com, you will see this interface where, as I explained to you, here you will have to enter what is your domain name, and this is your domain name without the V2. So once you click on sign in, you will get your all familiar page, which is basically for the login. And once you log in, you will essentially get to your instance with all the data. So this essentially is going to be the process that you will essentially go through. So we hope that this will be a very smooth process. And as I said, if for some reason you're not able to migrate before June 4th, then the automatic migration will kick in and will basically migrate everyone.
Shiv,
yeah.
For not, can you restate, hey, Will, for those that are running on-prem, can you just again restate the migration process, how it is not affecting them.
So if you're on-prem, then basically we will not be touching your instances. The only thing is that once we finish this migration, all the new updates will come to the on-prem users as well as to the cloud. So we'll always keep both of them up to date. So there is no differentiation in functionality in on-prem or on the cloud.
Yeah. So does that make sense to everybody on the on-prem? This is real, the yes, this is for scale, Kubernetes, etc. But this is to from a security aspect, from a few other reasons, to get rid of the naming convention. So this is not affecting on-prem at the current moment. Cool. Thanks, Will. Awesome. Okay, good. Looks, and Shri makes sense. And so Will, Shri, Mark, all good. Okay, perfect. All right, Shiv.
Okay, so this is basically the entire migration sequence that will happen. So you can migrate it when it is convenient for you, because I know all of you basically have probably client meetings where you're going to present a report, etc. So we don't want to yank it from underneath and basically kind of say if something does not work. So choose a time which is convenient for you, probably when you're doing this. And then when you basically come to the new portal, basically everything will continue to remain the same. The new experience, basically once we have migrated the new portal, we'll basically be bringing in the whole new experience. And this is something that we've been discussing. And as I said, the new experience, I think, will be something that you all folks will like. And basically it is going to be driven primarily from the whole CIS compliance perspective. So we will bring those to the table next week, because the team was very busy with building these migration pieces together. So next week, we're going to basically bring all the artifacts, which basically are talking about what will be the new experience and what we'll be deploying in the course of the next couple of weeks, which I think will basically kind of re-cement the whole pattern of where we came from, which is we've taken a lot of feedback that all of you have given us. We in fact had a feature request count of almost like 340 different feature request tickets, which we then distilled down to basically almost 120 features. Our goal is to basically, of that 120 features, we believe that the most relevant to this particular product is a set of 79 features. And so those 79 features, I will basically bring it up to this team next week, along with the screen mockups for each of those. So I want to basically review it with this team, and then we will basically kind of start, because we worked in the background to make sure that everything is feasible, and then we're basically bringing it onto this particular forum. So we'll be deploying this, and once we basically complete this deployment, we will be bringing in those features. And as Andrew was saying, one of the things that we are beginning to see is that I think what we're going to kind of do is to lean towards bringing everything under the CIS umbrella, because that seems to be kind of the framework that everybody is comfortable with. So we will basically kind of drive everything from a CIS implementation group's perspective, and making sure that you're able to drive those along with basically the vulnerability management. That's kind of the theme that we are basically getting to, and then basically kind of expand into certain other pieces that we talked about. The other thing is that one of the biggest things that you will see once you basically come into the new experience, basically even in the current portal, when you migrate, is basically all reports, historical reports, are going to be available, which means that you will be able to, the reports that you generate this month, the next month, you will be able to kind of pull those reports from a historical perspective and view those reports. So that's something that we basically, I think we missed it in the first revision, but we basically brought those together. So we will maintain those revisions for 1 year, and then after 1 year, basically, technically, how is it implemented? It's an S3 lifecycle policy. So we're putting your reports into S3, and if you essentially kind of look at it, then once the year is over, then essentially those documents are archived and destroyed. So that's basically what we are doing. So you will get a complete history even in the current portal that we are putting in portal.mycybercns.com. Plus, there are a few changes basically to the user interface to make it more performant. My colleague Swami has been working on them, especially related to, like, if you look at the asset page, it was basically one long page, etc. So now it's essentially being consolidated into multiple sections, which makes sense. So all of those we will essentially kind of go through next week and basically walk through this once this migration is done. So that's basically what I wanted to share for this week.
Sure, that's exciting. I just wanted to mention the CIS and I don't, so one, I don't think you're insinuating we're going to get rid of other compliance frameworks, but what's exciting, Tim Fournette's on. Tim, just your thoughts. I mean, the possibilities of where this could go, if you think about it, is right. One of the biggest, if you think about, there's something called the community defense model, which looks at the top 5 attacks as mapped back to MITRE from CIS, and 4.1, control 4.1, which is a secure configuration, is the #1 way in which you can mitigate those top 5 attacks. So picture this, we can set up a gold image of what, based on a CIS standard, of what the most hardened image could be, and then call on something like Roost. Tim, maybe you could just chime in. This is visionary, right? Where this is probably going to go and where I see things headed, but call on something like Roost to check based on the results from CyberCNS. And if it's not, if any configuration changed, Roost would go reinforce the goal, the image for hardening. Tim, and your thoughts on something like this, or where you feel things are headed eventually?
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now what MSPs are looking for is just some way to know like what their tools can be helping them with. So they're going through the different safeguards and CIS and say, okay, here's this one. What tools can I use in my organization to help me identify whether or not I'm even getting the information to know what I'm doing here. And then once I'm able to identify these weaknesses, what can I do to get them fixed? So, build an automation or apply, some group policy or something, and make sure that you're monitoring to make sure that it's getting applied. And then it goes back to your identification tool to make sure that the automations are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, really cool. Really cool stuff. Okay, thanks for that, Tim. Let me jump over to some questions. So Damien, start with and Dennis, I agree. It was this is a major undertaking. I can't imagine. Shivik maybe at the end can give us a sense of the man hours that are going into this, but it's phenomenal what they're doing and the time they're doing it. Damien says, is there some way that cloud clients can start the migration process, or just wait until the banner appears, Shiva? Like, is anybody, if someone's anxious to get it done, I'm not saying Damien's anxious, I'm just using my words, to do it sooner.
Now, if anybody basically wants to get it done sooner, please send a mail to me. I will basically make sure that you're ahead in the queue, because we're just picking a set of clients. I'll tell the team to basically push you on top of the queue in case you want to do it quickly. Not a problem for us, but basically we can't do everybody at the same time, because it has basically restrictions in terms of bandwidth that Amazon basically provisions per customer. So we just want to make sure that we don't have failures because of the inbound or outbound traffic that basically we're going to be generating during the migration.
Cool. So if that would just be a support at cybercns.com, Shiva, request?
Actually, just send it to me, because I'm doing this thing. I just don't want support I want support to work on existing customers and do all of that stuff. So you can send it to me. I will take care of it personally.
Okay, I'll put Shiva's email in real quick here. All right, so then we go to Ian. Ian says, what if you're a cloud client but have your own DNS cert configured, Shiv?
So that basically yeah, if you have that, then there is a little bit of a problem because we need 1 week to essentially. So I'll tell you what we are essentially going to do for your own DNS or CERT, right? We're going to basically host basically a proxy basically in front of this server, which will allow us to basically, like, you can point to that particular IP, and we basically just create an Nginx configuration to proxy pass you into the region that you are into. So we can do that, but basically we will not be able to do it immediately after the migration. We will need at least a week after migration for to basically migrate you into that system. That was the same question that Dennis had asked earlier, saying that if we have our own custom domain, how we do it, and that's how we basically will do this.
Yeah. Tim, by the way, thanks for sharing that with Alex. Just Alex, we are doing Cyber Essentials. It is coming. It's in this quote unquote release pack. It's just that the precedent, right, or priority right now is the migration, but it is. Shiva, where would you say Cyber Essential? I know it's being actively worked on in QA.
We're actually done, and in fact, I'll present this next week. The difference I see between Cyber Essentials versus all of the other frameworks is Cyber Essentials is basically more higher level in terms of, for example, I'll give you a simple example of where we had to do things a little bit different. They have a lot of pieces which are at a company level rather than everything at an asset level, right? So for example, does the company have a firewall, and does the firewall have mitigating policies in place? That's one of the things that Cyber Essentials talks about. And so we now basically written certain rules which basically not only apply from an asset perspective, but get into it from a overall company perspective, looking at assets. Have you got a firewall? Have you added the firewall into our system? If you have added the firewall into the system, are there any open rules? So evaluating that, and based on that, basically giving the compliance is where we are doing what we're doing with Cyber Essentials. I think we'll have to do this with others also, but we started with Cyber Essentials. So we have all of that pieces in place. And as I said, I will present this next week, and we'll basically push it as early as possible, because I know this is Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. This basically was something that was requested a lot of time, and we are basically just ready to push this out.
That's awesome, Shiva. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I agree, Alex. Yeah, it's coming. It's, they've been adding a lot to it. So, okay. Ian, seems like that would affect. Are you commenting back on your original post? Seems like that would affect the migration. Oh yeah. Okay, perfect. Sean, okay. I know you guys have been working on migration. Any new things new for the ConnectWise ticketing?
There is basically a whole bunch of new things for ConnectWise ticketing, not just ConnectWise ticketing. In terms of creating new tickets, yes, but basically the content of the ticket, templatization of the entire ticket content is something that we've been working on. And that is basically something that we're going to release as part of that next patch. Because one of the things that everybody, I think, basically is worried about is the fact that the way that we are basically putting information in the ticket is not useful in certain cases. So there were a few suggestions. We've incorporated those suggestions in terms of putting links, putting basically templates into it. So that will basically get, I will basically demonstrate that next week to everyone.
Got it. Okay, Matthias, is there an overview of the feature request and their status? So in other words, is there a roadmap, like, if you will, Matthias? I think ideally, Shiva, I know, again, it's really bandwidth, Matthias. Like in a perfect world, we would have Canny or something like that. And I think as soon as, and I'm going to talk on behalf of Shiva, you clarify, it's bad. I mean, you guys are just utterly slammed based on everything simultaneously going on. So not that feature requests aren't important or roadmap isn't important. It's critically important. I think once Shiva and team, come up from air from this latest migration and release, I think we can then start to get into like implementing a system like a canny, and people will be able to see where those things is that in essence, Shiva, a fair way of saying it?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Let's see. And Adam's commenting no difference between Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. Shiva, there have been comments, people like creating their own quote unquote compliance or their own, framework. Will that be something eventually? And are there pros and cons to that, do you see?
See, one of the things that we are basically, again, as I said, I'll bring this to probably next week or the week after next, basically the ability to go through each of the standards and say that I want this from this standard, this from this standard, and this from this standard, and say that this is my MSP standard. We basically will be able to provide that, which is basically a comment which was given to us by the people who are doing the analysis of our product right now, saying that each person should be able to define what standard they want to, and it also be able to define. So one of the things that we are changing up right now, I'm giving up too much of information, my team will kill me, because the whole point was that the company, when you go to a company, right, you want to be able to define what level of standard you want to apply for that company. So for example, let's take CIS, which basically is kind of where everybody is talking about. So I want to say that I want to reach CIS implementation group 1 compliance for this particular company. This is basically a bank, so I need IG3. And this basically is like a manufacturing firm, so I basically need IG2. So the ability to define that level of compliance and be able to see only those compliances that you have chosen is something that we've been told is extremely will be extremely useful for everyone if we add it to the product from their analysis perspective. Now, I was going to bring this up next week, but since we are on the topic, my only request is if people can let us know if that is something that is applicable, because one of the things they told us is that, okay, you show me PCI, DSS, HIPAA. If this is not something that's we don't care about HIPAA for a particular customer, why are you showing me that information, and or how does it make sense to me? So the ability to separate out and say that I'm interested in this company, I'm interested in these compliances. I need to basically maintain this level of compliance in this particular, under this particular compliance level, is basically more relevant than basically just giving a full dump of that data.
That's really cool. Yeah, Shiva, that's really cool. In fact, Shiva, if you and I go all the way back in time to before even I would call it was Alpha Code for sure. When I was with Swami and Venue at SnapTech, that was one of the original use cases.
That's correct.
So this is going back 3+ years ago. Yeah, yeah, I mean, Dennis brings up a point, kind of, GRC-esque, if you will, certainly. But it would be huge. It kind of crosses over the MyIT processes of the world where, again, it's not a shock because Gary Peak is a dear friend of mine, but it's like, everybody's got tool fatigue. It's like, how many tools, and can we automate some of this stuff? Or if you are using a tool like that, eventually maybe there's an API where we fill in a bunch of things that are manually being checked right now. So I think there's a lot of possibilities there. So that's really exciting, Shiva. Okay. I think we're up to date. Mike, by the way, we haven't forgotten about ServiceNow. Again, it's prioritizing. Shiv, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
We've also tested ServiceNow. In fact, we took the public instance of ServiceNow and basically tested against it. So we have the complete service ticketing, basically, which is in place. Second is basically the ability to invoke workflow that essentially allows you to kind of say that if this particular vulnerability, like a critical vulnerability occurs, I want to initiate a workflow. So the ability to kind of do that trigger is also basically put in there. And of course, basically ability to save the configuration is also in there, and its configuration is coming for everything, including ConnectWise or any of those pieces.
Yeah, very cool. All right. So I didn't want Mike to think we forgot about him. Okay, Brian, when you run, your compliance checks for like something like HIPAA, it's showing a lot of items out of compliance and are being managed by us. Are you allowing us to check items that are managed by, I think what Brian is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, to say, hey, like, let's just pretend you're not responsible for that. Maybe it's something that the EMR or HR is responsible for, that you could say, hey, I have no control of that, or maybe put a comment in there being managed by, Cerner or something. Is that, do I have an example correct, Brian, of where you could put something of a different value in there? If you could just comment, or come on.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. There's a few items where it's recording that on reboot to make sure it's shut off. And we have in our RMM tool to make sure they're shut up, but your audit log is not showing that. So it shows it as being out of compliance. Password change is showing out of compliance. So it's not looking at our RMM tool that are managing those processes for them. So it's always shows as being out of compliant. So I'd like to be able to put a check mark in there saying, no, we're managing those processes.
But Brian, and before she comments, Brian, could there also be the example where it could be a third party where you do want to make sure that, your CYA, it's like, hey, this is handled by, again, I'm using the example.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We put the onus back on the client that they should be doing these policies in there. And if we can check it out, saying it's being done or managed by the client or managed by the MSP.
Right. Or the third part, or again, the third party of
Correct.
the service provider of the EMR or something external.
Correct.
So what are your
Correct.
thoughts there, Shiv? Again, I know this is roadmap, etc. But
so Andrew, my understanding is that for every piece in the compliance, we need the ability to be able to say that suppress this non-compliance because we have a mitigating control. So for example, in the example that was given, they could enter saying that this is basically being done by the RMM and this is what it is. Second is we could suppress it, basically saying that it is basically not part of our scope. So basically we won't report on it. So if it basically says suppress because it's not in our scope, then it won't appear in the report, but it will be documented somewhere. And third is basically we can even basically give it as saying that it's a false positive. So that way it basically says that it's a false positive. So exactly the same thing that we have for vulnerabilities and remediations today, we provide it for compliances.
Yeah, my only comment, I love Brian's. I think you're right on. Again, I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record here, Shiv. The third party risk is a big one, because Brian doesn't want to get into a situation where, God forbid, there was some third party supply chain attack, and now all of a sudden there's finger pointing. It's like, no, we've been documenting this for a long time, that their third party uses SSH at times to come in and do something or whatever it is. Brian, is that so? You'd want that option as well, not just suppress, but comment that this is handled by X.
Absolutely. I'm dealing with a lot of doctors' offices that just because they're HIPAA compliant, they think they're going through the HIPAA controls. It's only policies and procedures, but when you go into the internal network, a lot of things are out of compliance. And I see that a lot of things are not being managed by us. So onus has to fall back on them with the documentation.
Does that make sense, Shiv?
Yep.
So fairly close to what you already have, that you could just adopt that framework in vulnerabilities, but just that one extra nuance.
Yep.
On supply chain.
Got it.
which by the way would fall nicely into your, I forget, control 15, 16 in CIS that they've added service provider management. Yeah, exactly, Dennis. Okay. So we're up to speed on comments in chat, I believe. Anyone else? Thoughts, comments? While we're waiting, Shiva, I do have a question if I could pose it to the group. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
So one of the things we get asked about on a fairly recurring basis, not like off the charts, is do you have customer facing literature, brochures, etc.? One, and that we could white label. So just maybe a yes or no. One, would that be helpful? But more importantly, before you say yes or no, would you guys be open to maybe taking Shiva on a upcoming partner call, just maybe 20 minutes or so? It might go a little longer than our usual time, but just giving input of, how you want to convey this, because again, we have to think about the lowest common denominator, which is the customer, and the customer, we have to take the presupposition of is completely ignorant to understanding really what we're talking about. So how do we get it into bite-sized layman's terms for them? So A, I hope that makes sense, and B, if you could let us know, maybe just quickly in chat, yes, we would be interested in kind of collaborating and figuring that out. Yeah, Tim, definitely the reporting's good. It just, again, like what we have to do is, what I always try to do is go back to the, to a customer where, they're thinking about running their business day in and day out. They're not thinking about controls and things like that. So how do we relate it to things they care about most, which is making money, right? Retaining customers, those types of things, mitigating risk, losing customers. Like, we got to apply it to their terminology. So
Yeah, that's why I'm saying, in my experience is that as an MSP, is customers want to see what they're going to get rather than just be told what they're going to get.
right.
So,
No, totally get it.
having something to hand them, saying, hey, this is what you're going to get that you can give to your regulators or your clients, that means a lot to them in a lot of cases.
No doubt. So you're 100% correct. Meeting compliance is important. Yeah, perfect, Ben. Okay, so let's do that, Shiva. On, if you're okay with that, because I think it would be really, kind of a nice asset that we could offer have as a partner.
Absolutely. I'm all for it.
Okay. All right, back to you, Shiva. Very helpful. Okay, good. So we got about 10 minutes left. Do you guys want to stop early? Give 10 minutes of your day back, or are there any other things top of mind? Lunchtime. All right, Shiva. Great job as always. To you and the team, really appreciate all your hard work. Shiva, any thoughts on next week? Is it, or would you need a 2-week, every 2 weeks?
No, we are going to do next week because we have a lot of stuff to cover in terms of the new features. So because the migration will be underway and most of them would have been migrated. So we want to get feedback. Plus, we'll also basically talk about the new features that are coming and get feedback on that.
Okay, perfect. All right, and so everybody, until next Wednesday, have a fantastic day, fantastic week. And if you're in the US, very nice long weekend. Take care, everyone. Thanks, Shiv.